Bow your hearts with me. God, creator, redeemer, sustainer, draw near now. Amen. I know I've said this before, but what I know of love, I know because of Mary Jarrell Nee Woods, my mother. Her parenting style is fierce, quiet, loyal, devoted, and a tiny bit low-key gangster. You'd better know she's got a bit of cash stashed on her person and will put a serious hurting on you if you mess with her children. But she's also a lady, so trust, there will be pearls and a perfectly fit two-piece worn to the occasion of your verbal beatdown. That's right, verbal beatdown. No need to catch hands. Like Jesus, she's a lover, not a fighter. She is by profession, but like all parents, a teacher. It is she who modeled love in my life through example, shaping and molding, marking forever my siblings and I. She taught us how to be. I can't count how many times I saw her do the thing that needed to be done, telling, but most of all showing, teaching in all those really significant but mundane ways. She stepped in when my siblings and I, her disciples as it were, fell short. Who picked up the clothes, tied the shoes, prepared the food, taught and trained us? Who picked up the clothes? Who washed them? With embodied action, she prepared us for life beyond her parental ministry. She also taught us the nuances of silence, the healing power of a hug, the release found in tears. She did all of this and so much more with vulnerability and courage, wielding her obvious power with such grace. In doing so, she taught us how to do and be those things for ourselves and prayerfully for each other and the families and communities we would one day belong to. She'd say she did it out of love, this self-emptying, this love born of her responsibility to God. She modeled what it looks like to love and serve those that belong to her. She taught us, I say, how to be. Well, we've had a lifetime with my mom, but for Jesus, the time is short. Jesus knows this and must, in a sense, fast-track his curriculum as a teacher. What must be taught must be done so and quickly. During supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. Jesus stands up at the table among the disciples, the people he'd come to know and love, those who belong to him. He stands to make clear, offering one final push to convey in this moment what he said all along. And what better way to do that than by showing? Whether Montessori or Waldorf, Charlotte Mason, or the most ancient indigenous wisdom, the elders, the educators, they show us. They know that showing experiential learning is a most powerful tool. In today's text, Jesus offers nothing if not a masterclass in multi-sensory experience. He goes full throttle teacher mode with a visual, tactical, auditory experience grafted into the lesson plan of the day. If they're paying attention, the disciples would see him as he stood to remove his outer garment. They'd see him grab the towel. They'd hear the water as it filled the basin, as it splashed on the floor between washings. They'd hear the different sounds in the room as the space shifted in response to Jesus' moving presence among them. They'd see him bend low and feel his touch, his water-soaked hands. They'd see him as he sought to meet, each person's gaze. This one-on-one lesson, this individualized instruction takes them by surprise. The time, attention, and care that goes into making sure each disciple knows how to be is startling. When it's Peter's turn, he looks at Jesus like he's some kind of drunk uncle at the Sunday dinner table. Like Mary's, Jesus' actions are so out of the norm, so unexpected. He's caught off guard by the intrusion on his person, by his Lord and teacher. Because in those days, foot washing was considered one of the lowest of tasks and performed by only the lowest of servants. Only the youngest and least trained were given such menial work. And for the very same reason, if performed voluntarily, it conveyed the height of devotion. This kind of devotion from their teacher, it was too much. The power-reversing dynamic played out in the action of Jesus' kneeling before him was just too much for Peter. Here, Lord and teacher becomes friend and servant. And Jesus wants us to know that this is how it should be. Neither party in this dynamic is exempt from this kind of service, this kind of love. Jesus' exchange with Peter reminds him to reinforce his action with words. So moving beyond what he hopes is caught to the power of what might be taught. And identifying the teaching moment, he inquires, "Do you know what I have done to you? See what I just did there?" Jesus doesn't just do this for them, it's to and with. Service, he says, goes both ways, and it is done to you, you do it as it is done to you. And with others, I've laid down a pattern for you, he says. What I've done, you do. What Jesus wants to accomplish with this experience, this teaching, is for the disciples to understand the way of mutuality. He wants them to know how to survive in the coming age. Together in service to each other is the only way. He wants Peter to know that they, the disciples, will teach as well. These are the kinds of teachings that mark us eternally, and if received, are never forgotten. We carry these lessons with us, impacting generations to come. Jesus shows us through service what love looks like in community, and instead of being individualized or private, this kind of service calls for reciprocity. Our lives in community should be marked, he says, by the love language of service. Because love, without it, ain't love at all. Parents, they say, are our first teachers. And that work is action-based. When a parent bends low to tie a shoe, shows a love that's tough when inside they themselves are tender, or when they offer undeserved grace, parents model what that takes, what love looks like, and what that takes into the world, giving us the tools we'll need to survive. They love us into maturity. They show us how it's done. And so it is with Jesus. So it's all about love. Toni Morrison asserts that love, this kind of goodness, should be given a voice, and that is what we have here. Jesus pressing us to use the voice of goodness and compassion through acts of service. And not just feel-good acts, acts of service that humble us, that make us uncomfortable, that cost us something. Acts of service that are unexpected, maybe even a little bit intrusive. Our communities, Jesus says, should be distinguished by these radical acts of mercy and love. This commitment to service, to the nurturing one to the other, this kind of love is, or at least should be, our life-sustaining practice. Jesus says, I've saved a space for you. He offers the invitation to this kind of love-based, hands-on teaching. And there is only one requirement: submission. Unless I wash you, you have no share with me. This washing and renewal, this teaching is essential. It's the opening of the door to Jesus to do what only Jesus can do. Jesus' actions with the water and word are what cause us to remember. And it is this remembrance that forms us, because something happens in our submission. In submission, we grow to know and trust Jesus, but also begin to know and trust ourselves. In submission, we open ourselves to what is true. We learn that Jesus wants us to care for each other deeply and intimately. And that's hard for us because we don't want anybody up in our business like that. In a culture of oversharing, we resist true intimacy. Online, we hide, we control the narrative, curate our sharing. But here, Jesus gets all up in their business, first by bending low to show in embodied action what it's like and how we are to behave in this new sense of kingdom. It is like that with parents as well. We don't really want them all up in our business, but it's so important, it's vital that we allow their teachings to mold us. There is learning for us in the new command, in the new commandment. On this next part of the journey, the disciples will need to care for each other. I'd say that's true of us. So hear the word and hear it now. Love one another. Just as he has loved us, we also should love one another. This is how we'll work together to create a new reality. This is the way of the heart, sometimes casual, but absolutely deliberate. This is how we tell the world what we want to say. It is how Jesus says we are known. It is our voice of goodness in the world, our language of love. Our responsibility to God commands this kind of service. So let our acts of love be excessive and disruptive. May they be unsolicited, never trivial or incidental, never the afterthought. May they be intentional as we come alive to each other and in doing so to ourselves. This is how we are to be. And Jesus has taught us. He's shown us. In the end, all will abandon him, but what of us? Unlike the disciples, we've got time to mull this over, to steep ourselves in the story, to make our way, to continue to practice and grow in faith. Having chosen instead to share an agape meal this evening, we won't do a formal foot washing tonight. More important, though, is the heart space we can enter together right here, right now. Perhaps in the heart we can cultivate a sense of intimacy with Jesus through practice. Perhaps we can take part in this lesson, hear the news of the new commandment. So just for one moment, will you bow your hearts with me in the sanctuary and online for a moment of stillness, to just imagine, to take your seat in that room, and to see Jesus as he bows before you, and to maybe meet his gaze, not turn away. We'll pause here for just one moment. This is how we are to be, and Jesus has taught us. he's shown us. Amen.